Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of A Time Out with Tony. As always the case, I'm happy to bring you another exciting guest, somebody who I've been looking forward to speaking to for a while. He and I have a relationship, and you'll hear more about that as this interview goes on, and you'll hear and learn about his story. But he and I go back quite a few years, and we've developed a good friendship and a mutual respect for the work that we've done in the community. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Gareth Saunders. Gareth, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good evening, Tony, and to your guests. It's my honor to be here tonight.
Gareth, tell us a little bit about yourself. I always like to start off by asking my guests to give us a little background of yourself. Give us the abbreviated version, but more importantly, like, where were you born? Where were you raised? Tell us where you're from.
I'll give you a quick bio of me. So I was born in the South Bronx, New York, and I was raised there. My family had one older brother, and I have a twin sister. A lot of people don't know that, and I'm the youngest in my family. My father, he was a fireman, and he did boiler work for a hospital. My mother was a hairdresser, so and my father also had his own business. Air conditioning repair business. So I come from a family of business people. Grew up in the South Bronx. I grew up in the projects, Forest House projects. Went to public school all the way up to high school. And then once I got out of high school, I went to college. I went to Howard University in Washington, D.C. I studied biology and business there. I also joined ROTC while I was in college, and when I graduated, I got a commission as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Air Force. So that's a brief. Well, then I could go beyond that, and then I did like 4.5 years in the military. Went to different places, New Mexico, Illinois. I was stationed in Washington D.C. also, and then when I got out, I got a job with a defense contractor. That's what brought me to Massachusetts, up in Lexington, Massachusetts, near Hanscom Air Force Base. So that's what brought me to Massachusetts, because I'm originally from Bronx, New York, went to school in Washington, D.C., and ended up here in Boston, Massachusetts. I love the northeastern part of the United States. There's no place like it.
Right.
And then once I got here, I'll give you the quick version. I got immersed. I got involved in the local church, which was great. And then as a result, and I'll go into that later, maybe if you ask me some questions, but really as a result of that church inviting me to represent them at a community meeting, that's how I really got started in community activism and politics. And so as a result of that one meeting, and like I said, I'll go into it in a little more detail, that exposed me to community stuff, zoning stuff, interacting with elected officials and appointed officials in Boston government. And that's what got the bug for me to get involved in politics. And a short story, I did work at the United South End Settlements in the late 80s. I was the assistant coordinator for housing and neighborhood development under Ken Wade. Some of you guys might know Ken Wade at that time. Worked for Bay Bank. After that, I was a business development officer and a loan originator for home mortgages. And then from there, I ran for office in 1993. That was the same year that Mayor Menino got elected as the mayor of Boston. So one thing I want to just throw in there is, like, when you run for office, particularly if you run for at large and there's a mayoral race going on, it's like a concert, it's like a tour, because you end up in the same venues, the same places, because there's forums and stuff. So you really get to know the candidates. So that's the point I wanted to make. And then after that, was elected 3 times to the Boston City Council. I left in the December of 1999. And then fast forward today, I'm an administrative officer for the Registry of Motor Vehicles. So that's what I'm doing today.
Fantastic. I mean, you said a lot, and we're definitely gonna delve in a little bit more.
Wait, let me throw in there. And also, I'm a Christian. I'm a believer. I love the Lord. I'm saved. And that's a key part of my life. That's what kept me going. Even when I was knocked down a few times, my faith in the Lord and others people building up and praying and interceding just really helped me.
Great, man. So I want to backtrack a little bit to your beginnings. You talked about your parents, and you know, I'm going to give them credit. And if you correct me if I'm wrong, they had a lot to do with the man you've become today.
Yes, yes, definitely. Do you want me to just say a little thing about them?
Absolutely, because you know, as you and I both know, not everybody's fortunate enough to have both, you know, their parents in their lives and investing in them when they were younger. But your parents were such excellent role models for you that it shaped the man that you've become today. So yeah, say a little
No,
about your
no
parents.
doubt. I have to give my parents credit, the Lord credit, and some of my early elementary school teachers back then. They really cared about us and they invested in us. So I think a culmination of all of that poured into my life. Now, my father, let me just tell you about my father. One of the things that at the time I didn't like, but now I'm so thankful, and God rest his soul. Um, he used to buy like grammar books, spelling books, like workbooks for us, particularly me and my twin sister, because we were the youngest ones and we were still in the house. And I remember this, every Tuesday at 7 p.m., he'll spend 30 minutes to an hour with us, schooling us. And then we would have tests. My father would give us spelling tests, a vocabulary test. And, when I think about that, that's 50 plus years ago,
Right.
and I was like, my father, I really appreciate him because he took the time. And my parents, both of them would say, education is the key. The only way you're going to change a lot in life is to go and pursue and get the best education you can. Another thing that my parents instilled in me, and this deals with race, is they said never prejudge anybody because of how they look, their race. He says always judge them on how they deal with you and how they treat you. Treat everyone kind and fairly until they give you a reason not to. So that's
Mm.
something that my parents instilled in us early.
And it's obviously stuck with you as you've gone into an adulthood in your various capacities and careers, including the military. So,
Yes.
yeah, you know, you and I met, you know, when you were in the office many years ago, and you know, we ended up meeting because I reached out to you when I was doing
Yes.
a youth basketball league in the community in a high crime neighborhood that had a bad reputation. I refused to accept that reputation as to be the truth, so I got involved and did a league. And I remember reaching out to you to give me some support and help. And I've always been impressed with you. And I remember inviting you out to come speak to our, not only the athletes, but the parents who would gather at our park every day. It was called Marcello Park in Roxbury, right across from the
Yes.
Academy Homes.
Yes.
And I remember you coming to share your story and leaving a word of encouragement with the student athletes that were there in our program and also the parents in the community. But what I found admirable about you is that, yes, you were a city councilor. We're going to talk a little bit more about that and your experience there. But you were not adverse to coming out into the community and really touching the people. You weren't one of those elected officials who like to stay in the big downtown office. You were out in the community, man. So that's how you and I met. And that's left an indelible impression ever since that. And you and I obviously have grown in our friendship since then. But do you remember
Yes.
that time how we met? And I remember
Yes.
calling you and like, yo, I need you to step up and help me. That's it. Give me some support here. And I think at the time I was like, can we get some trash barrels, some basic things like a place for our parents to sit? And you moved on that quickly. And I really wanted to say thank you for that support back then.
Oh, you're welcome. So, you know what? I've always been community minded. And you got to remember, I grew up in the projects in the South Bronx. So I wasn't afraid of crime or areas, because I was exposed to that as a young man. So, and one of the reasons I got involved, and I'm going to share this with you, in politics, I remember I was 8 years old in the Bronx, and my mother had to take me to the emergency room, right, because I was sick. And I remember it was so crowded. They had people in the hallway. They had this one person on a cot, and he was covered, up to his head, and I could see blood bleeding through the sheet, and gum stuck on the walls in the hospital. It wasn't the cleanest hospital. It was a public city hospital.
Yeah.
Um, And I remember as a young man just sitting there, I was like, no, we deserve better than that. No, I want to help people. And that stuck in my mind. So every job and everything that I've done from a teenager to today, the major theme has been, how can I help people? And when I made the decision, I was working with the bank at that time, and I had a good job. I was helping people get loans and getting in their homes. So that was admirable. But I was like, but by being an elected official, I can help more people. So that was my main motivation for
And,
running back then.
and piggybacking on that, because I was going to segue into that about your experience as a city councilor. Tell us a little bit more about what that experience was like from the inside, because it's one thing, there's an image and a vision of what you have when you're on the outside, and people can give you 100 different ways they feel about politicians and
Oh
how
man.
everything happens. And then there's the reality of what you had to deal with day to day. I want you to answer that. You already talked about what led you to delve into politics. That was one of my questions I was going to ask you, and you just shared that experience.
And
When
I
you
can
were
elaborate some more on that too. I can.
right. But what I want to know what that experience was like for you when you actually got elected, that from the whole process of being nominated, running, and getting elected. And then I want to hear, what was your agenda for the constituents in your district?
Okay. So let me run by real quick, and I want to give you an example. So this is how I really got started. So I was a member of New Covenant Church at that time. That's like in the late 80s. And and I was real active in the church. So I was at my job in Lexington. This is no lie. I got a call from one of the leaders in the church, and they say, "Hey, Gareth, there's a community meeting in Roxbury about development and zoning. Can you go and represent us?" And that was the same day. And I was like, "Sure." Went to the meeting. They were having a local election for the Roxbury Neighborhood Council. Okay. And they were like, "Hey, we have nomination sheets. All you have to do is get 10 people in the room who are Roxbury residents to sign your sheet. And then we're going to have an election," basically. So I was like, okay. I went around the room. I got the signatures, right? And then after they collected all the signatures, they said this. They said, there are 8 openings in the Roxbury Neighborhood Council, and we have 8 nominees with signatures. We set up a motion, right? And can I get a second? Since we have 8 positions open and we have 8 people who went around the room, got the signatures, let's just have one vote and let's elect all 8 into the 8 empty seats. And that's how I got on the Roxbury Neighborhood Council. And as a result of that, and let me just explain to people what the council did at that time, and I'm talking about 1987, around there. 70% of all the vacant land in Boston was in the greater Roxbury area. So it was a time when developers were coming in and wanting to have their way with the land in Roxbury. And the Roxbury Neighborhood Council, Chuck Turner was involved at that time, and Ken Wade. Ken Wade was the chair at the time, and then Chuck Turner was the vice chair. So we were like working there with the city development agency that was the BRA and others. And so we had to rezone all of Roxbury. And when I say zoning, some people may not know, but like when you zone an area, you can tell what type of development can happen in that area, whether it's residential, if it's multifamily, is it single family, is it commercial, is it industrious? So that's the type of thing that we went through that whole project. And we, in the late 80s and early 90s, we rezoned Roxbury, and Roxbury is probably due to be rezoned again now. So anyhow, that's how I got involved with that. As a result of that, I had to work with city agencies, elected officials. I remember Bruce Bowling, Councilor Bruce Bowling, Representative Gloria Fox, others were coming to the meeting. So I got a chance to meet these people as a young man. I was in my 20s, right? A young man. And so to be quite honest, I said, I could do this. Because sometimes we need examples of people who look like us, and interactions to say, and this is no disrespect to anybody, but I'm just as bright as these older people. They just have more experience than me, So that's how I got involved. So I just wanted to throw that in there because that's like a God thing too, because through the church got me at the right place at the right time. You understand? So basically that. So when I first decided to run for office, this is I'm gonna throw the Christian faith into the political action. So a lot of people at my church they were like, "Are you sure you want to run for office? That's an evil craft. That's an evil domain. You know, are you sure you're a believer? Why you want to do something like that?" And I was puzzled by people saying that. I was like, "What's wrong with these people, right?" Because God gave me a passion to help people and steered me down this road to do it. So I couldn't understand the, you know, the different opinions. I guess that's the best way to say it.
And if I could
Um,
jump in, and I would say many of them weren't being malicious. They thought they were giving you good advice. They were trying to be showing some caring and dare, right? And I don't think many of them, I would venture to say some of them may have been deliberately trying to get you to go away from it, but
right.
I would say some of them probably thought they had good intentions.
But you know, a lot of people of faith, they run from politics. They think it's the devil's playground, and they say, how could you be serious about your faith and you want to be in that profession? Now, some people get that when they're entertainers. You know, like if you're an actor or actress or a musician or a singer, so you know, and if you're not always doing Christian theater or gospel songs, they think it's something wrong with you. But see, they don't understand that God has created us and strategically positioned us in different marketplaces, you know, and that's how we touch the world. See, Jesus spent time developing 12 disciples, and the message that we know today came through 12 people. So I'm just saying that you know, a lot of people tried to discourage me, but I was like, in my mind, this is something I want to do. I want to help people. So I didn't really listen to those voices in my ear. And then I did some research. I looked at men and women in the Bible who were involved in politics. That's how the best way I could say it. And I'm gonna just give you a few examples, and we could get
Sure.
into that a little more. Look at Moses. Moses had to lead the Israelis out of bondage. It was millions of them. And
Mm-hmm.
he through God set the order, the laws, how to do things. So he was a in my opinion, he was a political leader. King David, he was a king. King Solomon, they were rulers of a nation. You understand? That's political. I don't
Right.
care what you say. And yet they were prophetic too. Look at Daniel. He was a second or third in command in the Babylonian Empire. You understand? That's a political governmental position. Um, Nehemiah, look at uh, uh, Joseph. Joseph in the Bible, he became the prime minister of Egypt. So
Sure.
these are just some examples. Deborah and Ruth, these were women who were leading armies and influencing government. So for me, I did my homework. I read the book, and I was like, I don't know what these people are talking about, but I see God's hands on leaders throughout time. So anyhow, that's what balanced and kept me going towards the political realm. Now, I want to get back to your original question. So
Yeah.
I ran, and it's so funny. I remember when I made my initial speech to say that I was running. It was in Blair's parking lot in Dudley Square, and
Yeah.
the reason I bring that up, Mayor Janey, I think she did her announcement in a similar location in Dudley. So that's why I thought that was interesting. Um, um, uh, when I Oh my God, it's so much. But basically, when I won the election, it was so razor close. Anthony Creighton was the incumbent for District
Right.
7, Roxbury at that time. And um, the bottom line is I beat him by 90 votes. There were 33 precincts in District 7, which is the Greater Roxbury district, which where I represented. And I broke it down. So that broke down to 3 votes in each of those precincts. So when people say their vote doesn't count,
Right.
that's BS. I don't believe that. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the lie, the enemy. Every
Well, we saw
vote
that.
really does count.
We saw that recently play out again in another district race here in Boston, right? There was a slim margin of victory. So I definitely, to your point of your vote does matters. So you win, you're excited, you're jubilant. You're like, okay, this is God ordained. What was that like being a city councilor? And now you got the position, right? It's one thing to go for it.
Yeah. You know, wait. First of all, let me.
Right?
Yeah. No, Tony, you're right. So this is so funny. After getting elected, I remember trying to go to the supermarket just to pick up a few things that would maybe take 15, 20 minutes. It took me 2 hours to get out the store because people kept stopping me, talking to me, congratulating me, and I'm thanking them for their vote. And it was crazy. So it was exciting. It was crazy. One of the things that I noticed when I became city council, when I called people, guess what? They returned my calls. That was a clear difference. When you're going places, people acknowledge you, people put you to the front of the line. I mean, things like that do happen, and you start to feel it, right? So, real quick, when you go for a position you've never been in before, you may think you know what the job entails, but you'll never know until you get there. I'm just going to say that to anyone. So, for people who don't know what the city councilor does, I'll give it in a nutshell. There are 9 district city councilors in Boston and 4 at large, which means they represent the whole city. Okay. Um, yeah. So that's the makeup of the city council. We do 3 main things. The the mayor's office actually prepares the budget with all of his departments, the police, the school department, so forth and so on. But for them to be able to spend that money, the city council has to approve the budget. So that's one of the things we do, major things that we do. We approve the budget, and that's usually in the spring of every year. Um, we write laws, legislations. There's different types. There's ordinances, there's homeroom petitions, there's resolutions. So there's different degrees of severity or importance of legislation. And number 3 is really we use the bully pulpit, meaning our voice. We get to speak about issues because people want to hear our opinions. What's going on with rent control? What's going on with development? What's going on with the public education? So you can use your voice, meaning your written and spoken word, to influence things in people. So to me, those are the main three things that a city councilor does. Um, um, Let me tell you, once I was elected, it was fun, parties, and all that stuff. I was in office maybe about 2 months, and I had a group of developers come. They wanted to meet with me, and this is serious, Tony. So 2 guys, I sat and I met with them. They tried to bribe me, man. I
Wow.
hadn't been in office for more than 2 months,
Wow.
and I'm sitting there because I've seen it in movies and I've heard about it, but I never experienced it myself. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God. I'm saying this to myself. Oh my God, Gareth, do you know what they're doing? They're trying to bribe you to support their project and give you uh, something in return. Let me just say it that way.
Mm-hmm.
How I got out of that, Tony, I played dumb. I acted like I didn't know what they were trying to do. It frustrated them. And when they left there, I'm sure they sent out the signal like, he's not going to be somebody we could work with. So that happened 2 months into my term, Tony. So that's real. People come after you to try to entice you, to try to get you to support their efforts or whatever they may be.
Right.
So that does happen,
So
unfortunately.
that there you go. There was your first real challenge to your integrity. See
Yes.
what kind of character were you? You talk about everything as being a spiritual realm. So the enemy sent some of his agents in to test you right away, to see if you got caught up with the glamour and the glitz of the job, and if you were willing to sell your soul for whatever the cost may be.
And they came early. They didn't wait till I was there for 6 months. They came early to see if he's going to play and work with us or not. And clearly, they probably said, "Oh, he's too dumb. We can't work with him." But I knew exactly what I was doing. That was my way to get them out and just get them out my office and out my face.
So I want to go back to the question. So you've gone through that first trial, but you came in with an agenda for your constituents, right? You knew the community. You've been in the neighborhood council. So what was your agenda in your first term in the office? What did you set out to accomplish?
I'm glad you asked me that. So one of the things that struck me, I remember driving from downtown Boston on Charlotte Avenue, right, to Roxbury. And I noticed when we crossed the dividing line, Mass Avenue, everything changed. Like everything not everything, but a lot of stuff in the South End was taken care of. The streets, it was more well manicured and cleaned. But when you cross South and cross Mass Avenue, potholes in the street, um, abandoned buildings. It was just, I couldn't believe how stark difference just crossing a street would be. So one of my things is like, oh no, we got to fix this. We got to change this. So my initial agenda was to create like a council with people from the district, because I felt that I didn't have a monopoly on all ideas. I wanted to hear from my constituents what they wanted to do. I had, when you're campaigning, let me just say this: when you're campaigning, you get a cinch. People tell you what's on their mind. So you get a little agenda just by campaigning, knocking on doors. One of the things that I noticed when I was campaigning, this is back almost 30 years ago, 1993, I heard a lot of Latino music, man. And I realized that the district was becoming more, there were more Latinos in Roxbury than there were previously.
Right.
So one of the things that I did, and I got a lot of credit from the Latino community, is one of my staffers, I hired a Latino brother. He was from Puerto Rico, and he was bilingual. So I knew for that part of the district, he would be a great liaison. So when I did that, you got to remember, when I got elected, out of the 13 seats, there were only 2 Black city councilors, Charles Yancey and myself.
That's right.
So what that did was all the Black, brown, yellow, red, whatever other non-white or Caucasian people, they saw Charles and I as their city council. So even though we were district councilors, I from Roxbury, Charles from Mattapan, the city of people of color came to us. So we were really at large councilors, or citywide, as well as district councilors. So the Latino people, because they were in love with me, because I hired one of their members without them asking me to do it.
Right.
And the reason I did that is, like I said, when I was campaigning, I saw that there was a growing Latino population in Greater Roxbury. And so that's just an example of one of the things I did. One of the things I had to do, and I learned campaigning, when I kept like trying to encourage people, say, hey, we can make a difference. We could get the street lights fixed. We could get the street paved. We could get our parks cleaned up. Their attitude in 1993 was, yeah, do you know, you're talking about Roxbury. They ain't going to do nothing. It's Roxbury. And I was like, where's this thinking coming from? I knew it was coming from. It was reality. We were neglected as a community for years. So one of the things that I did, and one of my staffers helped me with that, we created a list of key numbers, because we were going to empower District 7. So if you had potholes, here was a number to call. If the street light was out, here's a number to call. If you wanted the park cleaned up, here's a number you call. And so we created resource lists, and we gave them out, hundreds, thousands of them throughout the district. And we encouraged people, because that was a barrier. People was like, why am I bother calling? Nothing's going to happen.
Right.
We had to fight through that. And so that's one of the things I pride myself for, because I felt that in the 90s, I was a bridge between the old Boston and the upcoming new Boston. The decade in the 90s, that's kind of what I look at.
Sure.
We were a bridge to that. And so part of the value was just getting people to believe that. So I remember, I played basketball. So I used to play at Malcolm X Park a lot. And the guys would come to me and say, Councilor, the water fountain's not working. And I was like, okay, but here's the list. You pay taxes in this city, right? You vote. You call the Parks Department and say, I want my fountain fixed. So even though I call the Parks Department, I empowered the brothers and sisters who use the park. This is our park. We pay taxes. Call them and demand you want it fixed. And so that was a slow process, but it's a process that I believe my office helped initiate at that time.
How would you grade, when you look back over your career in the city council, Gareth? What grade would you give yourself?
Oh man, why are you gonna ask me that question? Hey, if I'm gonna grade myself, I'm gonna give myself an A. Come on, man. Now, some of my constituents might not agree with me.
Right.
But you know what? No. To be quite honest, I'll give myself a B. I'll give myself a B, because I was young and I had to learn, hit the ground and learn stuff, So I was now if I was there now, it would be I would be at triple A plus, you understand? But
Right.
back then you had to learn. And what's very interesting. I want to give you, I don't know how much time we have, but I want to give you a few examples of things that I had to deal with. And a lot of the newer generation don't understand. Like I served in the council with Dapper O'Neill, Jim Kelly. These are men who have, let's say, not the best history when it came to race relations in our city. Um, and they had some antiquated ways of thinking when it came to issues like race, affirmative action, and other issues. So whenever those issues came up, it was like a slugfest verbally. I could work with them on other issues, and I learned. See, in the council, you have to learn to not make it personal, because on one issue or one vote, someone may be your ally, but on the next one, they may be your opponent. So after each vote, you need to erase the board, start
Right.
anew. That's the
Team
only way
sport.
you're going to survive. Okay. I remember, and this is dealing with Mayor Menino. See, and this was really hard for me. God bless his soul. He did a lot of great things for our city, and I'll give that to him. But he wasn't perfect like no man or woman is. And so, what was one of the hardest things for me is my district loved Mayor Menino. So, whenever we had conflict, let me put it that way, I wanted to do something for my district and my people, and he didn't want to. A lot of my constituents, I had to be very crafty because I couldn't tell them that Menino was against this because they wouldn't believe me,
Right.
because his public persona was so big, and his popularity in the city and particularly in Roxbury was big. So I had to really balance it, because sometimes we would be arguing, right? And then we're going to a ribbon cutting on Seaver. And then I have to say, oh, smile and be nice to him. And he had to smile and be nice to me when we just was arguing at each other. So a
Sure.
lot of people don't understand that. So the private person, elected official, is different from the public one that you see day to day. So I had to say that. I'll give you an example. One day, the Dudley Merchants Association, they call my office about public drinking, trash in Dudley, all these problems in Dudley. They're calling me all the time, and I'm doing my best to make the situation better. So I finally set up a meeting with Mayor Menino and that Merchants Association. Now, I had a list of all the issues they've been like hitting my office with about, we need to
Right.
do this, we need to do this. When we got in the meeting with Mayor Menino in his office, they're all smiling, cheesing, and niceties. Nobody brought up one of the issues that they were pounding my office about, right?
Right.
And I said, hold up, what about this? And before I could finish the sentence, they're like, no, 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 don't say nothing, don't say nothing. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
Well, after it took me 2 months to get this meeting, so you could tell the mayor exactly what you need, and y'all all playing nicety and smiling. So what I had to do is I didn't out them. I was like, okay, that's how they want to do it. After the meeting, I brought them into the curly room, and I blasted them. I said, don't you ever complain about anything, because you've been calling my office for all this time. I get you a meeting with the mayor, and you're all quiet. Everything is rosy. There's no complaints. No, we can't have that. On other issues, when I had to push the mayor because he was so popular, I've had black and brown people come to me and say, Councilor, slow down. Don't rock the boat too much. Don't. And I'm like, what? Don't you want change? Aren't you tired of eating the crumbs from downtown? Don't you want a piece of the pie? But there was a segment, now that's not all people, because you have like what we call the rah-rah, mau, activists, and then we have the other people, so you just have to do a balancing act.
So you alluded to this earlier, Gareth, and I want to get to this because it speaks to you, you being a man of Christ. You had, when you first were getting ready to enter politics, people were like, why would you go into that devil's lair, right? You're a man of God, a man of Christ. There were times, I'm sure there were times where you had some conflict with who you were as a man, and as you just mentioned, being a politician or an elected official, right? How did you navigate that? Just real quick, how did you navigate that where, maybe it didn't sit right with your spirit, but your job called you to do this? How did you navigate that?
Okay, that's a great question. What I learned is you have to set your parameters before you meet the question. So So what I learned, and this is through my faith, I set sort of universal principles saying, I will do this, but I won't do that. But you got to do that in advance, because in the moment, the emotions and everything, you don't know what you're going to do. So I was glad I was able to do that. So when certain issues came up, I kind of already knew how I was going to deal with them. Not all of them, but many of them, just because I stood back and took the time to think about all these what ifs. And then another thing that helped me is I realized, like, I represent 90,000 people, right? More than that, probably 120,000 people. And a lot of them are not Christian. Some of them are Muslims. Some of them are atheists. Some of them are agnostic. Some of them are Buddhists. So I had to realize men, women, straight, gay, you know, young, old. So I had the mindset is I represent all of them, regardless of what my personal views are. So I had that perspective, and that really helped me dealing with a lot of issues I had to deal with when I was in office. Um, I had people who supported me faithfully. You know, you can't succeed without a base or support group or team. So I did have that. I had people praying, some people praying for me. Unfortunately, the leadership, and this is how I feel, this is my opinion. I wish they would have did more as far as encircling me with prayer and intercession, because you meet a lot of demons and devils when you're in politics, and you need that extra layer of covering, which unfortunately I felt I didn't get the level I needed. So there were times when I went to the leadership, and I didn't get what I felt I needed, and that was discouraging. But it is what it is, you know. Um, yeah, I'll say that. Now there were good things that I got from my church and support.
Sure.
You know, my pastor, he endorsed me one year I ran, which was, he hardly ever endorsed any people. He gave me you know, opportunities to speak. So, you know, I'm thankful of those. So I don't want people to get it wrong or twisted, but there were things where I could have been more of I felt I could have helped the church more if they would have just utilized me more than they did. You know, you don't want anybody taking advantage of you and using you, but if God put you in a place, you want to be used to help, you know? So
So just a couple more questions, guys, before we wrap up. In 2013, I believe it was, you ran again for an at-large seat,
yes.
right? Unsuccessfully, I'll add. But
Yes.
what
Yes.
made you want to get back into politics at that time, after you had just been through that first experience? What made you think that that was the time to get back into it?
Well, to be quite honest, I looked at the evolution of the council members, and I felt that with my experience, I could help, that there was a void at that time, not with all of them, but with some of them. And I felt that, you know, my perspective, uh, my experience and knowledge would have been beneficial to the council and the city of Boston at that time. And then also it would have been a upgrade in the sense that I was a district councilor. Now my playing field would be the whole city. So you know, I had to, it was a great experience because you have to campaign throughout the whole city. So it's like you're running for mayor, because you basically have to do the same thing a mayoral candidate has to do. And you get to see the different villages within Boston, because every neighborhood and district is different in some ways, but yet the same. Um,
Right.
but you know, can I give you an example? I want to give you an example because I think some people don't understand. Like, so for example, when the 7 years that I was there in the council, um, Jim Kelly was the president. He's from South Boston, and hard taskmaster sometimes. So I remember there was a resolution that my office had put before the council, and remember there were like remember there was a bombing of a church in Birmingham, Alabama, back
Yeah.
in 1963. Four young women, 14, three of them were 14 years old, one was 11. They were murdered in that bombing, and
Right.
and at that time, that was September 15th of 1963. So my office, we came up with a resolution kind of honoring these young ladies. Jim Kelly refused to let it go on the floor. And I was upset about that. And his reason was it has nothing to do with Boston. And so he had this hardcore rule. If it wasn't specifically dealing with Boston, he didn't want us to touch it, basically. And I said to him, no, we're going to put this on the floor. He gavelled me and he said, no, I will not allow it. So what I did and my office did, we got on the phone. So the council meets every Wednesday at 1 p.m. I don't know if they still do that, but that's it. We got on the phone. I called churches, relationships I had with pastors, with congregants, and everything and told them what happened. Don't you know? In 2 weeks, the meeting in 2 weeks, I had a whole group of pastors and people with signs outside of the chambers of the city council protesting, basically. So I remember the meeting, and this is important. I want people to know. So the meeting's about to start, and all these people, black, white, all denominations, with signs. And then Jim Kelly comes to me and said, "What's going on?" And I told him what was going on. I said, "It's because you refused to allow me to put this forth. I told my constituents, and they're out there." He called a recess. Bruce Wall was there that day.
Yeah.
And I guess he had a relationship with Bruce from the probation department or whatever. So he called Bruce Wall into his chambers and me, and we sat there and we negotiated. We went over the language, and he finally caved in and he let me introduce the resolution, and we passed it. So that's an example of how you work in unison with your community, and that's why I tell people, when you elect someone, you make them accountable, but you have to support them, because
Right.
we're only as powerful as those who are with us. So if nobody showed up that day, guess what? That resolution would have never hit the council floor, and we would have never approved it. So
Right.
that's an example of kind of stuff that I had to deal with, that I'm sure the councilors today, they don't have to deal with stuff like that. That's just an example I wanted to give.
So I'm going to ask you right now, Gareth, to put on two hats: the
Okay.
former politician hat and your man of Christ hat. What do you think is the biggest hurdle or obstacle that is hurting the Black community and keeping us from rising economically, politically, education, etc.? And what can be done to improve our current situation?
Hey, man, that's a book. Okay. First of all, I think education and awareness. We need to be aware of what's going on. And so the only way you're going to do that, you have to have people inside government and outside government working in unison, working together. Um, you have to, because there's pressure that as an elected official, as a Black elected official, I could put on the mayor, the governor, and my other city councilors, but then there's pressure that has to come from outside. Example: last year when Mr. Floyd was murdered, um, right, in Minnesota, um, as a result of all of the protests and demonstrations, a lot of legislation, a lot of governmental and private sector policies changed. Now, there have been people like me, I've been fighting stuff for years and it didn't change. But when that external pressure came along with the internal pressure, there was movement. So that's
Right.
key. So people, I heard people say, "Oh, you shouldn't march no more. That's 60s. That doesn't." No, you have to do a combination of things to move things. So that's one thing. I think somehow we have to be unselfish, more unselfish, and learn to trust each other, because without a certain amount of agreement and unity, you're not going to change something significantly in our city and our neighborhoods. You have to have at least a core group of people who have the same vision, working together and being able to pull in more numbers. You need masses to move things. So I think that's important. And then the key thing is to strategize and plan. I don't think we did enough of that. The last mayoral election in 2013, that's when I was running for city council at large. We had a number of candidates of color, right? And none of them made it to the finals
Right.
because the vote was split. Now
Just
that's a hard thing, but you know we're kind of there today, to be quite honest. So now it's hard to tell someone they shouldn't run for office, especially when they got the signatures, they raise
Right.
money, and they really believe in it. But at some point, you have to step back and say, what do we need to do to have a bigger win? You know, and that's a personal decision that each candidate has to make for themselves. But I would hope that we don't repeat the past from 2013. I'll just put it that way. But to answer your question, I really think we have to work together more. We have to be informed. We have to have people in strategic places so we know, because sometimes they don't tell us what's going down the pike. If we have someone in a room, they hear it and they sound out the alarm. We need to do that. So those are just some of the things. And I really believe that the only real change is you have to change man and woman's heart, and that's through our faith. So a lot of the problems we have with racism and other things, they're really heart issues, to be quite
Right.
honest. So I think we need a combination of all of the above. We need people praying. We need people being active, visible, vocal. Don't roll over and play dead. If there's something you don't like, do something about it. Say something about it. So I think that's what we need to do. And then here's a big thing: older generations, we got to pass it on to those coming up behind us, because there'll be gaps and they won't understand. You know, the same devices they used in the 60s to gentrify the South End, they did it in Roxbury later on, in Mattapan and other places. So it's like there's nothing new under the sun. Um, the enemy uses the same strategies to attack us. And so we would be foolish not to share it with our children and grandchildren, so that when they see these strategies coming against them, they know how to deal with them. So
Right.
one thing, the older people, we got to be willing to talk to the younger people, and the younger people have to be willing to listen to the older people.
Yeah.
I
Great.
think that's
Great.
important.
Great point, Gareth. So my final question for you is this: you know, what do you believe is God's purpose for your life right now? And tell us about some of the things that you're doing today that are making a positive impact in the community.
Okay. Um, wow. So I believe that my main job is to share my experiences, my knowledge, my relationship with Christ, my testimony with younger generations, so that, we keep hearing the phrase, we're living in the last days and Jesus is soon to come. I do believe that, but no man or woman knows exactly when. So the job of now I'm becoming an elder. I'm in my 60s now, man. I'm becoming an elder, right? So I need to share with younger men and women what I know, basically. And hopefully they could take that and use it to motivate their generation to do the things that we need to do. Number one, from a faith standpoint, to prepare for Christ's return. That's key. That's number one. And then number two, while we're waiting for him to return, let's improve our day-to-day living, our lives. How can we improve our lives? How can we share our love and faith of Christ with other people while we're here? So I think that's what my mission is at this time in my career and in my life. Um, so what I'm doing now, so I'm an administrator for the Registry of Motor Vehicle. And Tony, this grieves my heart, but every place I've been as a black man, I've had to deal with adversity. And a lot of it is just because I'm a black man. When I was in the military, I was a lieutenant, I had a major call me boy. And I had to straighten him out. Even though he outranked me, I went to the colonel and said, this is unacceptable. I'm a grown man. I'm an officer like him. He shouldn't call me boy. Now, he didn't like that, and I had to deal with the consequences, but I wasn't having it. You
Sure.
know, um, even when I was on the council, I had to deal with stuff. I had to deal with Councilor O'Neill one time. He wanted to introduce a resolution praising a white supremacist group. And I said, excuse my language, hell no, no. And I fought him tooth and nail. He threatened to shoot me, man. People don't realize that. And Kelly was like, oh, he's an old man. He's only playing. I'm like, no,
Right.
no, we're going to deal with this. So I made them deal with it. So things like that. Now, fast forward to today. Tony, I've been in one department, I'm gonna just say this, for 12 years. Okay. I have a good job. I'm an officer, so I have a good job. I have a good salary. But man, every white person in my department has been promoted once or twice. And the only two African Americans, African American woman and myself, we've never been promoted. I'm smart. I have a resume. I have degrees. White people who don't have degrees have been promoted above me. You understand? And
Yes.
then I'm saying this, when I brought it up the chain of command, people listened, but nobody did anything.
Mm.
This is 2021. That should not be in state government. Our governor should do something about it. The Secretary of Transportation needs to do something about it. Um, and it's not. That's just uh, uh, the Department of Transportation is just one state agency amongst many. And I've heard similar stories from black, brown, yellow, and other people of color saying this exists in state government. It shouldn't
Right.
be. It
Right.
shouldn't be. So part of what I do, I speak out against stuff like this and try my best to change it. And a lot of black people are afraid to speak up. And I understand why, because there's consequences.
Right.
People lose their jobs, or people retaliate in power. But you know what? We have no choice. We have to document these things. We got to speak out against them. We have to push, because there's no reason if someone's qualified. Because look, I think about this. I have degrees. I have a very nice resume. I'm a hard worker. I'm smart, and I'm not just floating my boat right now. But if I'm a black man and I can't get promoted, what about the 20 something that walks into the door?
Right.
Just out of college, they're excited about being in state government. So, I'm saying this to let people know that things are not perfect in city government and state government and the federal government. And that's just government. How about private sector, finance,
Absolutely.
education, academics, criminal justice? As a black man or as a black person, we fight these battles every day. And our white friends, some of them can't relate because they don't experience day to day what we do. One good thing, and I hate to say a good thing, but a positive thing that came out of George Floyd's murder was it exposed a lot of stuff to a broader community that we in the black community, we already know. I was
Right.
listening to Richard Pryor on the Sunset Strip a few months ago. That was in the 70s. He's making jokes about police stopping him, and he said, "Officer, I'm going in my glove compartment for my registration." Come on, that was in the 70s.
Right.
And look at the mess we're still dealing with. So, anyhow, make a long story short, these injustices exist. I know sometimes our white and other people get tired of hearing about them, but they don't live them day to day like some of us do.
Sure.
And so, until all of us are treated fairly and equal, we have to fight from the cradle to the grave. That's just it. There's no
And that
time for rest.
and brother, you just opened up a whole can of worms. I mean, you and I could spend a lot of time talking about what you just shared just now because it impacts every our industry and arena in our society. So what you just shared, and I liked how you equated the young people coming in who are excited and they have no idea what's ahead of them unless somebody like yourself and myself tell them these are the barriers I had to fight to get to where I'm at. Just want to prepare you for this and help you navigate this water and this landmines so that they can obviously excel and climb the ladder, but also be aware of them and not come in totally blind. So I think that's a great way to close our conversation, Gareth.
And Tony, I just want to say that the sun is about to set on my career, and in the next 3 to 5 years, I'm gonna retire.
Right.
So I could go into cruise control and just ride off in the sunset. But no, I care about my young sisters and younger brothers. They still got to deal with this mess. So I'm gonna fight. Now, a lot of people are afraid, but because who I am and what I've done, I've had a force field over me. They haven't gotten rid of me because I'm still in touch with my community, and I could always go to the press, which I haven't. You know, So they are aware of that, but they need to do the right thing for the right reason. That's all I'm going to
Right.
say. Governor, let's do the right thing
That's
for
it.
all
That's,
people.
I think at the core, at the end of the day, Gareth, that's all people could ask for is do the right thing. Be equitable across the board for everybody. So we all have access and have an opportunity to make a living and take care of our families.
Mhm.
Gareth, it has been wonderful, man, talking to you. You shed a lot of light on some things. You dropped some knowledge. I know
Thank you.
people listening right now are probably blown away by this things you shared and how you were willing to be transparent. And I thank you once again for being a guest on the show. It's been nothing but a fun time having you, man. And I look forward to continue to watch what you do as you continue to make an impact in the community, brother.
Thank you. And one last thing I want to say for everybody listening, you become the people you associate with, the books you read, and the things you watch or listen to if it's music. So make sure you protect your eye gate, your ear gate, especially if you're a believer. You need to protect yourself and your mind because there's a lot of negative stuff that creeps in through these venues. So just be careful who you associate with and spend your quality time with. That's important. And educate yourself. Read books. We know we don't like to read. Read some books. Learn about our history because you heard the term Sankofa. You got to look back and see what happened in the past before you could push forward into your future. So let's do that, everyone. I'm excited. Thank you, Tony, for inviting me. Please invite me and others back anytime. We can have a panel. We'll talk about this. And you know, I love the Lord, and I can honestly say my life has been 100% better since I made a dedication to the Lord Jesus Christ. Yeah, you still have ups and downs, successes and failures, but you process them differently when you know the Lord's on your side.
Well,
amen.
We're going to give God the glory and the praise, brother. We're going to end
Amen.
on that note. And to my listening audience, I hope you learned a lot by listening to today's show. As always, if you're being encouraged by this podcast, feel free to reach out to me. Contact me at Tony at timeout at TonyRPrice.com. Love to hear from you. Love to hear your comments. Any suggestions of topics and even guests, please feel free to reach out to me again at timeout at TonyRPrice.com. As I always said, you know, look for ways to be a blessing to others. So until next time, be safe, give thanks, and continue to encourage others. God bless.
Thank you. Good night. Good day.